negative deviance inquiry, looking for, in those areas where you put a lot of investment, why are these failing, right? So understanding those factors, and where do you look, okay? Often you look in promising practices literature, there is a whole case study, positive deviance inquiry literature and so forth to get you started on that pathway. And then we're going to look at how you assess resilience status of populations. And you saw examples yesterday and you've read about it. So we're not going to talk a lot about the details of that because frankly it's actually quite long and technical. But what we will talk about is some of the approaches that you can take, some of the considerations, and then how you might go forward on doing that. And really what we're talking about is resilience in the context of evidence-based resilience programming. And again, the notion here that we're providing information, baseline information about resilience in the communities and theme areas that we're talking about, that we, through analysis and assessment, identify promising approaches that can be applied and recommended to clients, stakeholders, be they USAID, local communities, and governments.
Excuse me, can you read out that slide? I can't read it.
Oh, I can't read it. Okay.
Maybe other people's eyes are better than mine.
Resilience baseline measurement and research on factors that affect resilience. 2, priorities identified and implemented for resilience programming, incorporating local expertise and modeling of resilience effects of different intervention options. 3, key indicators measured to determine resilience impacts of interventions, and finally impacts of shocks decline. So in fact, that's kind of the framework that we're operating under in terms of how our intervention is really going to influence resilience in Africa.
Nancy?
Yeah.
Just a quick thing on that. I think we're talking about shocks and stresses.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think it's a little confusing. Shock is different than stress, and
Right.
that's why I think
Yeah, shocks typically are more acute, and stresses are more chronic. And often we talk about acute and chronic. Sometime in the food security, we also describe those things that we're trying to be resilient from as shocks or stresses, right? And the shocks being acute, the stresses being chronic. And you have chosen different themes, some of which are chronic in nature, some of which are more acute in nature. And to be honest, in most cases, it's a mix. In most of the communities that you're working with, in the end, you're going to look at shocks and stressors because both are going to be present, right? And this, you don't have to see because you have it in your literature pack, and it's complicated. Probably take me a half hour to read it. But this is a framework that was causal framework that was developed by Tim Frankenberger, who's a colleague of ours in the food security world. But I think what's important to think about here is if you go from left to right on the diagram, that you have context factors. You have stresses and shocks, right? You have exposure to those. You have livelihood assets, structural processes in society and so forth, livelihood strategies. But the key thing there is that you have resilience pathways that lead to different kinds of resilience outcomes, okay? And these outcomes can be food security, adequate nutrition, environmental security, the various dimensions that we've talked about yesterday. What is important in terms of thinking about resilience is, how do we know if a community is resilient?